tournament.
Yeah, we are just about in the middle. I think just a couple weeks in. So
midway through.
We have a couple of these teams now on screen. We take a look at it. Some of these teams we've already seen before. Actually, we've seen all these teams before, and that's how they qualified into this group stages.
That is right.
So we're looking to see how they stack up against teams from other regions. I think this is something that we talked about coming into competition. We were excited to see how they would react in an international setting against teams from other regions with these competing playstyles. So how has that been for you?
Well, the playstyles have really shook up the league itself, because we came into the league saying that decisively Thailand will be going to be #1 coming into this one. But they've shown already that the teams from Indonesia, from Philippines, even Vietnam, have been completely destroying that philosophy, where Thailand are not the strongest team here. They do have some very strong teams, but they are not head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to their strength and rules of survival. They do play a very late play style. They do play it very slow and steady, but it has shown that aggression can make their playstyle kind of falter going into some of these matches.
So we're looking forward to see how they've adapted coming into this, whether or not the first week changed anything, lit a fire inside them, or if they're still going to go for the same very secure late game playstyle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, looking forward to seeing how the Southeast Asia general teams perform as well, especially considering some of these teams are from such varying regions coming in together, just having to form this final group.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are from Malaysia, so we have teams like 16X playing out of Malaysia.
Yeah.
War of Elite, X-Killer. X-Killer as well. But then we have teams like Fate, who are playing out of Singapore. They've had up and down performances so far. The Southeast Asian General region has been the biggest wildcard, because that's essentially what the region is, right?
Right,
Bunch of different teams from all over Southeast Asia joining together in the final qualifier. Their trends are mostly aggressive, but it's reckless aggression. From time to time, we see them go with aggressive strategies, like sieging up houses that they definitely cannot try and take from their opposition, and doing it anyway, because why the hell not? If they can, they might as well.
Yeah, so gotta give it a try. I mean, you miss every shot you don't take, so
pretty much.
This is Southeast Asian general teams, the wildcard region.
But they're doing pretty well. I mean, we've seen 16X, Fate, X-Killer pick up multiple victories here and there and do pretty well when it comes to standings. Only really Road to Victory, as well as War of Elite, who haven't had impressive performances coming out from the Southeast Asian general region. But from time to time, they'll pick up a couple of maps here and there and do well there. But in comparison to the teams from Vietnam, from the Philippines, and from Thailand, they're just not quite there when it comes to caliber of play. I do expect a couple of their teams coming out from the Southeast Asian general region to make it into the grand finals, being the #1 seed who automatically gets in there, as well as a couple of teams at the top of the last 10 teams. But I feel like a bunch of these Southeast Asian general teams will not actually qualify into the grand finals.
Yeah, it's a pretty competitive field for them to go into, so having to play so many stages just to get that seeding into the championships and then playing for that $110,000 prize pool, it's really difficult. I think, as you mentioned, 16 times, a team that probably I would expect to go through into the next stages of gameplay, just off the fact that, you know, they've had quite a decent amount of competitive experience between some of the players. So that's a team that, so it's really a question, because it's such a wide gap in skill level between some of the teams within this wildcard region.
Right.
I definitely think it's a big question to ask. What are these other teams going to have to bring to the table?
Well, for Vietnam, Indonesia, as well as the Philippines, I'm really looking towards the aggression that they already bring to the table. Now, this is something that has already shown to teams like teams from Thailand, like CT Off Gods, have shown that, you know, this aggression is something they didn't really expect coming into the tournament, because we watched the entire Thai qualifiers, and it was such slow matches. We had games where at 24 minutes into the map, nobody had fallen, or 28 minutes into the map is when the first few kills started taking place, which is really late into the matches. So I think that the aggression that the Indonesian, Filipino, as well as the Vietnamese teams bring in is something that the other teams really have to adapt to. The Thai teams are showing that they can, and they're starting to adapt to it in their own unique way of trying to avoid these fights very early on, whereas teams from the Philippines are showing that they're adapting to the other region's aggression by picking fights even earlier than they already have been, and making sure they execute on those fights. That's something I think that the Southeast Asian general region really needs to pick up as well, because they're the only one who really didn't have a coherent identity. They played well, and the way they played the matches were pretty good, but they didn't have an identity as to how they played. They were basically the jack of all trades, and you need to have something that stands out.
I mean, that goes back a lot to the strategy with Battle Royales and things like having a specific place you drop towards, so that you always know that you have a consistent game plan to what you want to do going into the games. With that being said, the Southeast Asia general teams don't really have that as much. It's quite obvious that they really just go with the flow and they play according to the kind of scenarios that they pitted against. I think that while that can be good, it's also difficult for them because there's so much variance and variables that they have to account for. I think that's really cost them a lot going into these set of games. The Thai teams, they make it a lot easier just holding out to the very end.
Right, but I like that you mentioned, having set strategies coming into this. We saw quite a few times last weekend when FAW as well as Balthazar kept dropping at Russ Bay. One team from Thailand, one team from Vietnam kept dropping at Russ Bay. It was costing both teams quite a bit. Multiple times they were stuck in positions where they had to go for these prolonged firefights, and neither team really opted to change their strategy, and it was a night and day performance for them when they were in the same group and when they were out of the same group, because Balthazar and FAW had really poor performances. But as soon as you took Vietnam and Thailand out of their own groups and put them against different teams where they didn't have that drop every day at Russ Bay strategy, they started to do well because they started to loot, they started to use their strategy effectively and weren't incumbent by a team that did the exact same strategy as them. So another thing that they have to try and pick up now is to diversify their strategy and understand, we don't have to stick to this one set every single time because it does look good. And surprisingly, that's something that teams have to learn from the Southeast Asian region. As much as they don't have an identity and we criticize them for it, they also do diversify and adapt to the situations better than the other teams in the Southeast Asian regional clash.
I mean, that just sounds hilarious. It's like when unintentional hard dropping. When you go up against your opponents, you don't even intend to drop in the same spot, but then you just have this very specific area you want to loot consistently.
Yep.
This unintentional hard drop is quite detrimental. I think it's a commonplace issue. If you try and go for a hard drop, at best, you get 1 or 2 kills, and then you see the opponents back off. Very few teams at this very high level are even going to give you the time of day to go and fight in a straight-out firefight so early on.
Exactly, and you need to find ways to disengage very early on if you encounter those situations. Teams from the Philippines have been doubling down on these early fights in the sense that instead of disengaging, they'll find a way to actually take the fight to you right away so that if they do suffer casualties, it's going to be immediate, but they try and pick up the most they can so they can advance to the next few stages, and they're executing it well. Whereas teams from Thailand, they've needed to adapt to the aggression quite heavily as well. So their strategy has been trying to disengage as quickly and as efficiently as possible, even if it means they sacrifice 2 to 3 minutes of looting time trying to disengage. They know at least they will get out of there and they'll have a better shot with the 5 to 10 minutes they have remaining to get into their next few fights. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. Having these set strategies are not bad. Some teams that do drop into Russ Bay every single time do well. Some teams have even respected that. They drop there a few times, see that every single time this team's going there, decide they're going to be the ones that back away. There's teams from North America like Washed Up who were unfortunately disqualified, but they used to drop out of the plane every single chance they got at the start of the map. They wouldn't care where they go, but they'd be the first team to get their feet on the ground. That really worked out for them because we saw that a few times it was very poor because other teams would drop with them, but eventually they started to pick up the pace, and when they got the good zones for themselves, when luck was on their side, they took it and ran with it and would take it all the way home. So teams need to be able to diversify a little bit. Like you said, it's a little bit unintentional that the Southeast Asian region has come in, and the one thing that we criticize them for is the one thing that every other team needs to learn about them. But it's give and take, right? It's so many weeks of clashes between every single different region that teams have to learn and they have to adapt week on week. If not, you're going to fall short because it doesn't matter how well you do in this best of 5. It's you take the 25 games you play in total, combine the points, and that's what's going to matter when you go into the finals.
Yeah, so it's trying to build up the consistent lead over a bunch of different games. And we talked about the early game and how we develop how some of these teams have developed a strategy around that. And I want to talk about a little bit into the mid game as well, because you talk about how Thai teams, when they try and disengage with their opponents early on, they don't want to look for the fights. Then we start seeing vehicular options become so much more important. And we see that becoming quite diversified between some of these other regions.
Chalids was talking to us about it last week. Chalids is one of the pro players from the North American scene. He was actually interested in the differences between the Southeast Asian region utilizing the truck strategy that was very popular, that was popularized by the North American teams, right?
Yeah.
And he also wanted to know, as a viewer, what was more entertaining, the truck battles or the prolonged firefights that we saw from last season. Let's go into that in a little bit, because it seems to be a small siege here. Neither team has really taken a shot. NF are going to try and go for the collapse.
NF looking to try and push in, establish some control around the different areas in this space. Looking to cover some of these vantage points.
Just holding on at the moment. Road to Victory is keeping their angles. They're making sure that they can't breach this effectively, and this is what we were talking about. You get stuck in a position where you've only got basic loot. Road to Victory, a couple of members only level 1 helmets, a couple of them no vest at the moment, but already in a firefight, and this is going to delay their looting time. If they take casualties, this is going to affect how they position in the final few zones. But number 1 team from Thailand are relentless when it comes to this siege. They've even got players outside, quite far away from these compounds. Road to Victory, only 2 players, so that could be a detriment to them.
Holding out 2 players, still have a pretty good position in this house. Very difficult to siege up. It's not one of the other houses where you have multiple angles that you can try and break in from. It's quite one-dimensional, so if you have decent firepower, you can still hold it out. The best bet here coming in for NF is they have some grenades. You can try and set things up for themselves, but otherwise looking to just hold this position down and smoke out the opponents over time.
They're just, you know, again, there's nothing for them to take here. They've used 2 grenades to try and go for the siege. Road to Victory play it well. They hold their angles. They know that they're split up and they can't get their other 2 players there effectively. Now Road to Victory are actually rotating over. They could be caught in the crossfire, taking some damage. But number 1 team finally disengaged. And look at that. This is the adaptations that we want to see coming out from our teams from Thailand. They're so used to playing this late game that when they get caught into these small skirmishes and when they get caught into these sieges at 6 minutes in, they can't make a damn decision. Number 1 team spent so long deciding, are we going to breach? Do we push for this? Do we try and go for the kills? Do we go back and loot? Do we disengage? That for 3 minutes, they were just stuck outside the house. Now Road to Victory, they've been able to group up and they could try and take the fight to them.
Pushing forward and have a couple of guns being used, pushing in, looking to get into this house first. Already losing some health as they try and break in. Looking to push upstairs so they can hold this position down. Not the best loot coming in. So they, as you mentioned, that you hold on for so long, making wishy-washy decisions, couldn't really decide if they wanted to go for the siege or not. And for the other team who just ended up staying in the house waiting for the opponents to siege, both sides find themselves pretty underfarmed early on. Go make things a little bit difficult. NF still circling around this space, looking to try and catch out players as they push in.
Now breaching towards that house. They've got a couple of players down at the moment. Road to Victory, again, 4 members strong, throwing out grenades. Great chicken grenade there.
Pushing a couple of knockdowns coming in already. There's a kill onto NF, another knockdown.
It's only just left here, granted. He's the last member left from number 1 team.
Around the side, doesn't spot opponents moving in, but his teammates getting taken down, so he should know that they're there.
He's gonna be rushed here. RTB gonna get all those executes against number 1 team.
Limousine just trying to find some loot. They're looking to push in right now. Just Arm over from the side, looking to get taken down.
It's the last man. Just Arm, he's gonna be taken down. Road to Victory will get all 40 points from the frags here. Just Arm, last member standing, 1 tap's enough. Road to Victory get those kills, and look at that, Grennan. It's exactly what we talked about.
Pushing in, holding on, trying to decide if they want to make the push or not. They end up getting caught out, and that's gonna hurt them quite a decent bit.
Yes.
We're now looking to see how some of these other teams wanna capitalize off this. Now watching F9, they have 2 players drop down right now, looking to try and find the resurrect quickly. Over on the other side, FRS.
Yeah, they've been in a small firefight here. F9 are okay.
Roads found some knockdowns, but not looking to finish things off, not looking to punish F9 just yet. So that's interesting. The fact that he got a couple of knockdowns early on, I mean, that will affect the bleed out speed later on, but overall, not going to hurt F9 too much. They could just move to some other places, replenish the equipment that they have, the armor and helmets, heal up a bit. So they should be fine and good to go as they move on to the next stages of the game.
But let's talk about what happened just there with number 1 team. Again, they were the team with the 4-man squad, sieging against 2 players from Road to Victory. They were stuck in that compound, neither team could loot, and they spent 2 minutes trying to siege it, throwing out grenades, trying to push for play, and every single time they fell short. Every single time that was not the right play for them to make. And they eventually disengaged. So it was like, okay, this was the Thai team's adaptation. You disengage so that you can go and loot. You sacrifice the 2 minutes you just spent trying to siege. And since you couldn't find an opportunity for 100% success, you disengage, and say, you know what, we take the small loss, cut our losses short, and then proceed to the last few play zones instead. What they did, though, is they saw that Road to Victory were grouping up against, and they said, hang on, there were only 2 people there, let's actually try and take the fight, which was the worst decision they could have made. Road to Victory then had 4 players. This is one of the teams from Vietnam who excel in the early game fights. Vietnam as a region has done very well in these early game fights and have done very well at defending structures and positions. And number 1 team still decided they were going to go fight for that, which again is the Thai teams are trying to adapt to these early game skirmishes and these early game fights, but they haven't quite found out how they're going to approach it to a T yet.
Right, honestly, you felt like a fish out of water. They didn't.
Right.
Are you out of water? Are you okay?
Yes, I'm okay.
All right, but anyway, with that, terrible pun, but honestly, felt like a fish out of water. They didn't exactly feel like they knew what they were doing. It's a very different strategy coming in from this hyper late game play style that we've seen them go into. We've seen them, they play very well when it comes to these extended team fights, these extended firefights, drawing out in these long, wide open spaces where they have trees and natural terrain, which is able to cover them. We see them perform very well in those spaces, but when it comes to sieging up these urban terrains, we see that they can't hold a candle to what the Philippine teams are able to do.
Right.
They are much more versed in the ability to siege up houses. So I think the Thai teams are biting off a bit more than they can chew right now, trying to change things up too quickly.
And the Thai teams, don't get me wrong, they do well when they battle in open field. CTR gods who are on your screen often find skirmishes in the early and mid game, which are outside of these real estate areas, which are outside of these urban environments, and they do very well. But when it comes to sieging and these very early skirmishes, they haven't been doing well recently. And number 1 team showing there that they were experimenting with how they're going to adapt to it. If this was 2 weeks ago, number 1 team would have saw the 2 players from Road to Victory and would have been like, no, next, we're not fighting this early into the match. But that right there, it was good that we saw them actually try and pick a fight.
Yeah.
I just think the reaction to Road to Victory grouping up was really poor. You were talking about the truck strategies that we saw coming out from North America. It was very popular in North America. It was a big meta change from last season to this season. The vehicle strategies have becoming increasingly popular in Southeast Asia. During the first few weeks of qualifiers, we saw much more convoys being picked up by the Southeast Asian teams and fewer truck fights. Off-Gods have the position here. Looks like there's going to be a small skirmish as Seal are currently on Training Island, just rooting up, scouting out for a couple of players.
Sometimes we're from the side, see a player get knocked down, but also find a return knockdown onto Off-Gods, it looks like. So right now, trying to find a siege onto this place. It'll be difficult, though.
Holding the ground at the moment. 16 times are fairly looted now. So they should be able to pick a fight pretty well. Ooh, good grenade coming out from Off-Gods there. Capitalizing that door being open. They're not afraid.
They find some time to get the res onto the player. Jumping on the outside. Not sure if they heard him. Might be able to see the push coming in. See the Off-Gods have a flank position right now. And it's like 16 times. We're not aware. And oh my goodness. Look at that chicken grenade.
It's only going to be 1 player left from 16 times that's left up. They're pushing in. Off-Gods slowly getting taken down, though, as this last member's going to stand his ground.
Ranked over with 2 knockdowns so far. Gets the reload. Looking for a couple shots. Finds the jump around. Looking at one more in the head. Not able to find it. Both sides switch out their weapons, but there we go. Ranked over gets taken down in 16 times. Off the back of a siege against CT Off-Gods, get dropped from the competition.
Well, at least he takes 1 person with him, but Ranked over almost eliminated CT Off-Gods after his entire team got knocked down. He missed 4 close range shotgun shots by himself. Now, I don't want to criticize him too much because he was stormed by 3 people, executed 1 and knocked down the other, then fell to the 3rd, which again, that's impressive. But missing those 4 shotgun shots, that's where heroes are made, granted. If he hit those right there, he keeps 16 times in the match. He keeps him alive for map 1, and it would have been a big hero play.
Yeah.
But he just couldn't hit the final few shots.
Truly highlight worthy, but a little bit too short. Not able to get that final knockdown.
Right.
And now we have some of these teams as the play zone closes in once again. It's like Fall Gaming, on the very far outside alongside Fate, who have split off the teams. Interesting strategy coming in from Fate, opting to go for this split very early on. It's already in the 3rd play zone. The fact that they've already had a player sitting outside in the blue, waiting on that radiation damage, it's going to start stacking up pretty heavily. I'm wondering what kind of meds the player has by himself.
We've seen a few more teams execute the med strategy. Fate have been doing it religiously. They have been tanking the zone, using their meds to try and survive outside the zone. I believe one of the North American players, most of the North American players have coined it as the med strat. It's been working out pretty well for Fate. They were a middle of the pack team. They were approaching top 4 just by that strategy alone, but there's already a fight here. Pirate team against Balthazar.
Pirate team, it's your boy Roger. The only guy that's going to go aggressive in the Thai region, apparently. Now pushing in, FRS looking for a couple shots against the opponents. See them hide behind a tree, trying to hold on, but my goodness, FRS get taken down.
It's Fury Road being eliminated, but we're still watching this fight here. X-Killer gonna try and siege up here against one of the other Malaysian teams. They don't find anything for themselves.
Just a very quick drive-by finds a little bit of information on the opponents, but opting not to go for a fight. They still are looking for those positional points. Don't want to see themselves lose too much too early on. We've seen how that can hurt some of these teams. Dropping a player, it isn't as bad to drop that one player early on, but still a numbers game. Having 4 versus 3 is still going to hurt them quite a bit. Here we have X-Killer rotating around this house. Supply crate right over by the side, but it looks like there's some vision control coming in for the Vietnamese team.
They must have spotted out Seal there from Vietnam. There was one player on top of that roof. That seems to be what X-Killer are going to try and disengage away from. They want nothing to do with that. But this is X-Killer driving around in trucks. It seems like they're trying to find proper position. They're still outside the zone. They've got a little bit to go in. But they're hovering around the edges, trying to see if they can find a good spot to settle down and wait for teams to move into the zone itself. Or they could just stick onto this truck and try and find teams rotating out on foot, potentially get into these truck battles, which again, we talked about a few times, but we keep getting interrupted. It's a popular strategy by some of the North American teams. The Southeast Asian teams have been picking it up more and more. Now, I think North America do execute the strategy best at the moment.
Right.
But the Southeast Asian teams choose the right times to execute it better. Their timings are much better. Their execution is a little bit worse than North American teams, but they will always go for the truck strategy when they can. The Southeast Asian teams kind of get a good understanding of when is the right time to use the strategy and when it's a bad time to use the strategy. So we should see it used a little bit less in Southeast Asia, but also a little bit less effective than what we see in North America. I do like it. It has proven to be a big point for some of the teams in Southeast Asia. If you can pick up the truck strategy, you get an extra strategy in your toolkit to use later on. In certain scenarios will help you pick up a top 5 finishing, especially when the final few play zones are in open field. As DRT here taking quite a bit of damage. One of their players even going down. Not sure who from Road to Victory is currently in that fight, because we can see all 3 of their members sitting there. Must have one random straggler off to the side. Final few play zones are coming in here though, Grandin, and a lot of it is in the water. So we could see the big war that we normally see start at about 23 minutes. It'll be a little bit earlier this time round.
I think this just makes the training island such a more contested space. Here we go, player getting dropped on the side of DRT. Now pushing in, they're looking for the catch onto the rest of the players on the Vietnamese team.
Only 2 players left from DRT standing up. 1 executed, 1 currently down.
Pushing forward, both squads looking to try and make this siege in. It's going to be a difficult move, but they are looking to try and get this execute and control the space for themselves. You can just see Training Island, just a bare bit of it still in the point zone. So that space is going to be so heavily contested, but it also makes it very difficult to push in off that coastline back onto the main island.
It does. Now let's see if they actually do push in later on, but still going back to this fight. DRT, 2 players left up against Road to Victory. Healing up, trying to survive, trying to wait for them to push back in. They're not taking damage from the green zone yet, but they're being flanked.
RTV coming in with the push, get the knockdown. It's a trade back onto 1, but an easy wipe for RTV with only 1 knockdown on their end.
I think they played that very well. They kept throwing grenades, they found a single knock, and then they pushed for the second, and then they regrouped, split up 2 on 2, made sure they had the buddy system going, so if one person fell, they could cover him, and went for the final kills on the DRT, so 40 extra points going over towards Road to Victory. They're doing well for themselves so far.
Yeah, Spitfire was difficult to handle for the Vietnamese team. Road to Victory find themselves in a good position now. Training Island still in the safe zone. F9 over on the coastline, so it makes things very difficult for RTV if they want to push in later on. They have to deal with the opponents who will be able to watch that coastline and anticipating anybody trying to push in from the water.
There's a SEAL team from Vietnam on your screens. As their name suggests, they're actually pretty good at their tactics when it comes to sieging environments and playing in the open field, but they're one of the middle-of-the-pack teams that we currently have. They never impress every single best of 5, but from time to time, you'll see a very cute play coming out from them, and you'd appreciate it. Hopefully, we can see a little bit more coming out from SEAL team in the future. F9 have been getting better and better every single weekend that we see them in the tournament. They started off as being one of the weakest teams in the tournament, but immediately in their second best of 5 series they played, they had a top 5 finish. So if F9 can keep up the performance and consistently improve on the trajectory that they've already set for themselves, they could be one of the top dogs coming in from Vietnam.
Yeah, it's been a pretty big change for F9. They've gone in and played a couple of competitions before. Coming into this, they were a lot more shaky than we had expected. A lot of the teams actually were a lot more shaky than we expected. Now finally catching some footing for themselves. And I think that's really the benefit of a long league system like this. It gives a lot of teams to be able to come in and perform later on. It's not just if you have an off day, you're going to end up getting destroyed and lose a chance at the prize pool or at championship points or anything along those lines.
The opposite's also true as well, right? If you have a day where one of the weaker teams just does amazing in every single best of 5, you get rewarded for having a great set, but you need the consistency as well. So if it's just one day, that's not going to work out for you moving into the next few play zones. Watching Dark37 run against the green zone, he'll get there eventually. But there is already a fight going on here between F9 as well as SEAL. The two Vietnamese teams duking it out for the moment.
Just playing outside the play zone right now, holding on to this position. They're waiting for opponents to have to start moving in. Gonna have to watch this, pushing in with the Eagle right now. They're looking for a catch, gonna be fall pushing in. Trying to find a catch back onto DRT Gaming. It's gonna be difficult to get the knockdown on the vehicle. Push forward to get a knockdown. Last player standing somewhere over on the side. Vehicle now moving in. Boy, try and find the save. There's gonna be the run over roadkill. 4-4.
Well, we've been seeing a lot of those in Southeast Asia. They love ramming people down with vehicles. We've even seen a team actually win the entire damn map just from roadkill itself. But the fight's still going on here, Grandin. Dave Jan gets knocked out of Fate's vehicle. He's almost executed, but they've left him for dead. He's going to fall.
Easy little pickup, and now looking at maybe Boy as well, but they just drive away. Hover onto the side of the play zone. Try to pick up some loot quickly before having to move in. Very nice little play coming in for 4. They've had a very nice little run so far.
This is a team that does drop at Rust Bay quite a bit, and I believe they did so again today. They've had a good run in this tournament. They're looking like one of the standout teams from Vietnam. Great Firecracker knocks down Balthazar Joel.
Strong knockdown coming in. They're looking for a little bit more of this. Have the high ground advantage, and now looking for shots. Balthazar coming in with Firecracker return, trying to look for Joel as well.
That's a good nade.
Nice little clip around the side, but it's not going to be enough distance. Going forward, Balthazar now getting caught out in a small little space like this. Vigo taking a lot of damage. You're going to have to jump out very quickly. Truck now pushing in.
Yeah, Fate a little bit indecisive of how they're going to play this one. Nico's still sitting on the top of the hill. 2 members of Balthazar are all that are left, and only 1 member is standing up, and he's inside the shack. Joel wraps around, gets all those kills. Firecracker being thrown out still. But the defensive position coming out from Balthazar just not going to hold. However, FAW trying to play spoiler here.
Coming in, Joel looks like he might get knocked down. Stays alive just a little bit longer. FAW now pushing in, get behind the tree, looking to try and find a knockdown onto remaining members of Fate. Gets the knockdown onto Neko. A little bit of damage on the other side, but it's not going to be too much just yet. Pushing in, looking at a knockdown, but oh my goodness. 1 versus 4 jumps into the vehicle against the enemy. Looking now to try and push in, unable to find another knockdown, and 4 continue the aggressive streak, finding a knockdown and multiple kills on the enemy teams.
Balthazar play a little bit of spoiler there, interrupting 4's strategy. Getting 3 knockdowns at the very end. DTY going to show up. Warlords gets knocked down. FW's final member, Lancer, one of the standout players in the tournament, protecting his allies, throws down smoke. He wants to try and save the day here. He wants to pick up a few of his teammates. He's just a little bit too scared about who else is around him.
Has to look to try and push into the smoke to look for the res, as the remaining members of the TY perhaps want to come in and find the res, find the remaining kills onto the knockdown and weaken players on fall. A couple of teams just drive right by. You can see Truck now moving back in, looking to try and find catch down. Samoy actually finds the knockdown onto fall. Looking like they already have one player there. They managed to find another return rest. And Samoy, oh my goodness, gets revenge executed on him. A return kill coming in from fall after his teammate gets killed. Very nice little play coming in.
Lancer, as we said, playing very well at the moment. He's been playing well for Vietnam in general, as well as for FAW. He was quite crucial in the number of firefights that have been picking at Rust Bay very early on. And this is the road to victory. They've got quite a few frags for themselves, and they've found their way into the final play zone with 3 members left up, so standing strong. They're outside of vehicles, roaming around the map without any cover. Have to be a little bit careful. There's a few members behind them, and they haven't quite spotted them out just yet.
Victory and getting caught out over from the side. Nice little push in. Orange gets the kill. Fall now looking for the flank, looking to play upset. Gets the kill over on the side. The rest of his team nearby as well. Firecracker coming in. Now I have to deal with some suppressive fire from the opponents to try and push into the next play zone.
That was off guards with a few members left to arrive, moving into the final zone. 4 do get knocked out. So Sonic's going to take a hit there. Weren't in a very good position to push in for the next few zones. You can see a couple of teams are still outside the zone here, Grandin. We're going to have Road to Victory, as well as DTY, who are just trying to tank up the zone and heal up. But a few teams contesting for these final few play zones. Could be a big fight.
Everybody's still holding out around the perimeter. So it's going to be a little bit difficult. We have to see where the play zone lands and who luck favors in this point. For taking a little bit more damage, I think it was CT off guards. They managed to find a flank on them. Get a kill on the fall. Now dropping them down to 2 players is going to cost them a little bit more. Going to try and make this play around Pirate Team, who have managed to establish control over this house. Firecracker coming out.
This is a good redemption story for Pirate Team. They've had back-to-back poor best-of-5 series, but they started strong. For them to redeem themselves in this series would be great, and they're already starting with a good position in the final few zones.
Looking with the vehicle to find a knockdown onto fall. Should be looking for the rest pretty soon. Grenades coming out. Be aware of that. Chicken grenade going to be used. Over on the side, looks like continuing to use the chicken grenade. Gets the execute onto the fall player. And now down to the last man standing on himself. 9 players still remaining, and Pirate Team now have to deal with this.
Pirate Team, 4 members strong. Quite a few frags to their name as well. Holding on to this position. Lancer is trying to play spoiler, but they're rushing him. Molotov's being thrown down. He's only got one way to go, and that's straight to his grave.
Pirate Team get a little bit over aggressive there. Ended up having a couple of players drop. Now I have to watch out for this. Couple shots coming in and nice little execute. Vorix looking like he might be able to play upset.
Pirate Team still have 3 players left to arrive. Vorix is one of the 2 players left from Off Gods. Holding on to a good position here. Gets the single execute. He's going to try and take down Pirate Team's vehicle as well. That's a nice strategy with the final play zones approaching. 28 minutes in. This is a fairly long match for a Southeast Asian game. Vorix even boosting up to make sure that he has the maximum hit points possible. If he takes a shot, he could heal up by 10 to 15 hit points during combat itself, which could make or break the final few fights.
Quick push coming in. They're looking to try and make their way into the play zone. Grenades always starting to be pulled out. They get the knockdown onto the player.
Only 1 player from Off Guards left. Roger gonna push in for Pirate Team, and Aaron falls. Pirate Team hold on to the zone here, Grandin.
Nice little flank coming in to get the knockdown. Now he's just looking for the last few players. 1 left, actually.
I believe it's going to be Road to Victory's player outside the play zone. There he is. Look at him. Oh, wait. Hey. Who is this man? I don't think it's Road to Victory. I believe this is Team Fate. And yes, it is. Look at that, Grandin. We already spoke about this. Team Fate from Singapore. They have been consistently executing on the med strat. Every single game we've seen them play after week 1 has been 1 player is always outside the play zone. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like they just die right away and they keep the 1 player alive to med up outside the play zone.
Right.
But consistently, we've seen Fate have 3 players in the 3rd and 2nd last play zones fighting to pick up points, fighting to try and pick up that 1st place finish, and they've been playing it well. This is their insurance strategy, and it's been working for them. They've been consistently placing top 4. With that, it could be enough points over time to be #1 in the Southeast Asian General region, or even contest for a top 10 spot if they are not #1. It's a strategy that we've already done the napkin math for.
Yeah.
And it works. Until green zones get patched to deal more damage over time or get patched in a way that you cannot survive till 30 minutes into a map doing this, if you execute it well, 95% of the time, you are going to play second or third.
I mean, it's just astounding the fact that they've managed to put so many meds onto a player at this point. You can see he's still resting at this point. Okay, I think he's finally run out. And at this point, 30 minutes into the game, finally going to see the last player from Fate.
Look at that, 30 minutes in, Grandin. There you go. That's the exact strategy you're looking for, because now they pick up 175 points. We already did the napkin math. Every week, you want to aim to try and pick up 1,000 points total. Which means, with that strategy, where Fate plays second every single time, you need 13 kills and second place over 5 games, and you'll hit 1,005 points, which is enough to hit that 1,000-point mark in a best-of-5 series. That should be enough to draw you over the lines for the finals, and if you execute it in the finals, it's going to be very unlucky if that doesn't give you first place.
I mean, honestly, it's such a safe bet coming in, but there's also a level of difficulty. I think teams underestimate how difficult it is to properly execute the strategy well, because oftentimes we see teams, what ends up happening is they just end up dropping the player outside the play zone, they try and push in, they get a little bit over-aggressive, die very early on. You're not trying to hedge all your bets onto that single player, you're trying to diversify the win conditions that you have.
There's a lot of things involved in understanding when to use different types of meds. You can use bandages up to about the 6th play zone, then you have to use different meds after that. It's understanding where to position them, how long to loot outside the play zone, and there's a lot of communication as well between your teammates to make sure that you find the safe spots to execute this strategy.
Absolutely, and I think Fate pulled off a great job being able to find themselves a pretty end-game finish, and if they continue going in with this, they'll find themselves in a very good placing. As you mentioned, by the time we finish 5 games, they would have found themselves with a decent point system for himself.
So we'll have to see how they tally up these points, and we'll go into map 2 right after this break.